What's up, gang? We are here with something a bit more fresh and new. Today's topic is Pokemon.
We got another one of the boys to come out and help us with this list.
What's up, gentlemen?
At long last, some equal representation in these damn conversations.
If I didn't know better, I'd think you three thought you were the only presidents that matter. For crying out loud, Hillary and Bernie made an appearance before me. They haven't even been president.
Relax, George. I always plan to reach out to you one of these days. Now tell me, what do you know about Pokemon?
I love Pocket Man, Barack. I cried tears of joy when Ash finally became a Pokemon master. Some of my favorite mons are Gardevoir, Lopunny, and Vaporeon.
Awful specific choices there, George.
They're totally normal. What do you mean? Speaking of which, did you guys know that in terms of male human and...
Barry, start the tier list.
First up on the list are the OGs, Pokemon Red and Blue and Green, if you happen to have the Japanese copies.
The classics, Pokemon Red and Blue, are without a doubt two of the best games in the series.
I never thought I'd encounter a Gen 1er again, but here we are. Joe, Red, and Blue were absolute disasters even back in the 90s. Don't even get me started on what they are now. The games are riddled with bugs, the balancing is awful, and the entire world and story are so dull.
Pokemon Red and Blue are what started it all, and they have the best Pokemon designs. Far better than that dumb bullshit in Gen 5, I mean an ice cream cone, a literal chandelier, a trash bag. What were they thinking?
Yeah, Joe, Gen 1 has such great designs like the bird, the other bird, the pile of sludge, and how could I forget the ball with eyes?
So much creativity out of Generation 1 of Pokemon. A snake Pokemon whose name is just Snake backwards, and it evolves into a bigger snake whose name is Cobra, also in reverse.
George definitely has a point about the balance of Gen 1. I mean, crit chance being tied to speed, so Pokemon like Persian are insane. The special stat being both your special defense and special attack, making mons like Alakazam insane. Then there's insanely stupid shit like waking up from sleep, wasting your turn.
The fact that there were only 4 bug moves and all 4 of them suck ass didn't help the psychic type problem. Sabrina was stupid hard, and the only damn dragon move in the game was Dragon Rage.
This only scratches the surface of all the things wrong with Gen 1.
So what? Not everyone plays the game competitively, Barack. That stuff doesn't matter in game.
Well, there's also the fact that there's no in-game data for what moves do, not even accuracy or damage.
Thank you, Barack. Gen 1 were technical nightmares and disasters in terms of game balance.
I'm standing 10 toes down on Generation 1. Its peak and deserves no lower than A tier.
Joe, literally every following generation of Pokemon does nothing but improve from Red and Blue.
Red and Blue are going into D tier. They were dull RPGs back in the 90s, and they certainly haven't held up by any meaning of the word at all. But I suppose we can give them credit for starting things off and still being the 2 best-selling titles.
That's fine. I suppose we can let Red and Blue have their flowers on this one.
Unfucking believable.
Cry about it, Joe. Red and Blue are retro and not in the good way.
Next is Pokemon Yellow.
Completely irredeemable filth. F tier, no make a trash tier and put it there instead.
What the hell is your problem, Donald? Pokemon Yellow is better than Red, Blue, and Green.
They made an entirely separate game just to advertise the anime, and the fact that it sold 14 million copies legitimized them to start the bullshit third versions of the games releasing a year later.
And unlike GOAT games like Emerald and Platinum, Pokemon Yellow barely added anything at all. Pikachu sucks as a starter, and barely anything else in the game has changed.
Hell, they literally removed Pokemon from the wild. You can't catch Ekans, Coughing, or Meowth just because Jesse and James are in the game. On top of that, they left out Electabuzz and Magmar, 2 of the best Kanto Pokemon. They even left Weedle out. Pokemon Yellow was the original Dexit Crisis. These young kids just don't know.
I agree. I'm not going to add another tier, but Yellow is definitely at the bottom of F for being just a straight rehash of the previous title that arguably removed more than it added.
I cannot believe the games that started it all are in the bottom tier.
I'm surprised you can even be nostalgic for Gen 1 games, Joe. How are you even able to remember that far back?
I'll tell you what, Joe. If you think being earlier in history makes them better, admit that I'm a better president than you right now, and I'll admit the Gen 1 games are S tier.
Barry, move on to the next games.
That's what I thought, big fella.
Moving on to the Johto region, we have the Gen 2 games, Pokemon Gold and Silver.
Ass, pure ass. Put them in F tier, Barack.
Bro, we can't be putting all the older games in the bottom tier just because they're old.
I'm actually with Joe on this one. Donald, Gold, and Silver are pretty good titles.
I expected such a terrible take from Joe, but you, George, my fellow Republican, you've disappointed me.
I think there's something to be said of the Johto games. They solve a great deal of the balancing issues that Gen 1 had by adding the Dark and Steel types and splitting the special stat, cutting down the insane power of Psychic types, and strengthening the bug type as well.
Half of the good Johto Pokemon aren't even available until late game or post game. Why in the hell are Growlithe and Vulpix in Johto, but Houndour can't be obtained until all the way in Kanto? Where's Murkrow, Porygon 2, and Larvitar? Hell, you can't get Miss Drevis until all the way to Mount Silver. I mean, hello?
Donald does have a point, plus the level curve in the Johto games is complete cheeks. Claire's strongest Pokemon is a level 40 Kingdra, but Route 45 only have Pokemon that reach up to the high 20s.
Yeah, but you got to give gold and silver points for having a whole second region to explore. 16 badges is still unsurpassed.
More like half a region. There's literally nothing to do in Kanto besides facing the gym leaders and rematching the Elite Four. The only notable thing is getting to battle Red atop Mount Silver.
No matter what you say, Gold and Silver improved upon the Pokemon series and deserves a rank that reflects on that fact. Gold and Silver have some of the best side content in the series. Instead of just going to a city and challenging the gym, you have tons of additional tasks to take up. The Sprout Tower, bug catching contest, getting medicine for the sick Ampharos. It makes the games feel like they're more than just a series of boss rushes.
Pokemon Gold and Silver should get C tier. They're not great games, but they definitely aren't all too bad either.
Good take, George. Gold and Silver go in C tier, and now we move on to the third version, Pokemon Crystal.
Okay, now Pokemon Crystal is legitimately ass.
Now this guy is finally making some sense.
What changed your tune on Gen 2, Joe?
Crystal made one damning mistake. It didn't include the Mareep evolutionary line in the game.
That is a colossal irredeemable L. Mareep is the GOAT.
Mareep is actually a sheep Pokemon, Barry.
Joe, shut the fuck up.
Isn't the entire point of the third versions of Pokemon games to improve on the previous two? What were they thinking about removing some of the best Pokemon? You can't even catch Growlithe and Vulpix in the wild anymore, and Houndour still isn't available until you get to Kanto. It's like they didn't learn from anything at all.
No wonder Pokemon Crystal is the worst selling main series title to date. Absolutely the worst. Put it in F tier, Barack.
Now we're moving on to the third generation games, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire.
Massive points to Gen 3 for Ruby and Sapphire. Introduced some of the best designed Pokemon to date. All three starters are absolute GOATs. There's no wrong answer to which one is the best.
Tons of great Pokemon elsewhere too. Ludicolo, Aggron, Sharpedo, and Flygon.
The region is pretty amazing too. Don't let that IGN too much water bullshit fool you. Hoenn has some of the best and most unique environments and cities in the series. Fortree City, Pacifid Log Town, Mount Meteor, and Mount Pyre.
And you got some real side content in Pokemon Contest. The Poke Block game was so good.
Not to mention the games introduced a more involved plot line, with the evil teams actually having a clear goal that involved the box legendaries. Going after Kyogre and Groudon to solve the environmental destruction they caused were hype moments back in the day.
One of the best soundtracks to date too. The trumpets were insane for the Elite Four theme. The only real fuck-up of Gen 3 was not being backward compatible with Gen 2, meaning all your Pokemon from that time couldn't move over. This was the original Dexit.
At least there it was a design oversight instead of being an intentional decision.
Ruby and Sapphire are A-tier games for sure.
I will glaze the third gen till the day I die. It introduced two components to modern Pokemon that actually stuck around today in the form of double battles and abilities, keeping things fresh and new.
I do tricks on third gen. That's how good it is.
So I'd imagine we all agree on Pokemon Emerald as well.
S tier.
You're goddamn right.
If there's any reason to consider Emerald Peak, it's because the game is actually challenging. Gym leaders like Watson, Norman, and Winona can be killers if you're not prepared.
The fact that I can just say Route 110 and tons of people will start tweaking shows you the impact this game had.
I love that Emerald also focuses more on the new double battles, which went underutilized in Ruby and Sapphire.
We gotta gush about Emerald some more because this is how it's done. Instead of cutting out content, Emerald actually included both versions of exclusives in the game. You can get both Lotad and Seedot in the wild, as well as Sableye and Mawile. You can get both fossils of Lileep and Anorith as well.
To be fair, Emerald does cut out some Pokemon like Zangoose, despite including Sea Viper.
Emerald conjoins the story too. Team Magma and Aqua are active forces in the game, and instead of getting a straight rehash of Ruby's and Sapphire's plot, you get the added involvement of Rayquaza, giving us one of the most iconic scenes in Pokemon.
Not only does Emerald include elements from its predecessor, it expands on them too. Pokemon contests are now centered in Lily Cove City, while the smaller locations have been replaced with battle tents, which give you a preview of the battle frontier.
Speaking of which, the Battle Frontier is easily one of the best post-game content in the series.
No doubt it gives you ample reason to actually get into the competitive side of Pokemon without battling other people. Each facility is unique and the battles are challenging and tricky at the same time.
We can only say so much about Pokemon Emerald. It's going into S tier.
We are all synced up for this one.
I might fire up Pokemon Emerald right now.
George, save that for later. We still got a tier list to go through. Now that we're through Emerald, it's time for our first remakes, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Kanto is still shit.
Are you kidding me?
Come on, Donald, the remakes did a decent job.
Decent isn't good enough. Gen 2 and 3 improvements weren't enough to save Kanto from being a mid, uninspired region with a weak plot, weak villains, and minimal content.
What do you mean minimal content? The Sevi Islands are right there.
The Sevi Islands are damn near the only content they added to the game. You can't evolve Golbat even though Crobat exists in the game, which is stupid as hell. The environments are as plain as ever, even with the updated graphics.
You know what? I think Donald might be onto something.
I always am.
I cannot fucking believe that Kanto is being disrespected like this.
Okay, can we get a roll call on where the game should go?
D tier with the originals.
Absolutely insane. You cannot be saying Fire Red and Leaf Green didn't improve at all.
Gotta give them at least a B. They improved, but not enough.
It's Kanto, one of the best regions, with updated graphics and mechanics. Putting Fire Red and Leaf Green anywhere lower than A tier is pure blasphemy. And may Arceus have mercy on your soul if you let this happen, Barack.
What is a god to a non-believer, Joe? Anyway, I'm going to side with George on this one. Fire Red and Leaf Green were a good upgrade, but you can't change how uninspiring Kanto is. All the improvements in the world can't save it from being plainly boring. The only thing it deserves credit for is solving the issue that kept you from getting certain Kanto Pokemon into Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald.
This is absolutely insane.
The only thing that's insane is you dying on this hill, Joe.
Time for us to leave the third generation behind and hit up fourth gen, starting with Diamond and Pearl.
I'd like to rank these games high, but I haven't finished them. Still waiting on the HP bar on one of my Pokemon to finally hit 0.
All Gen 4 does is lazily give evolutions to older Pokemon.
I mean, that's not a terrible thing, Joe. Electivire, Magmortar, Gallade, Mamoswine, and Magnezone are some of the best Pokemon of all time.
You can't even get access to some of those in the main game. Magmar and Electabuzz can only be obtained by evolving their baby forms, which you can't get either.
Diamond and Pearl gives us another highly involved story as well. We're not just dealing with some mobsters or climate activists. Now we're dealing with a man who wants to remake the universe in his image using the literal gods of space and time.
Too bad Sinnoh is HM hell, though. Seriously, you need to pick up a B barrel, or you're gonna just be forcing shit moves like Rock Smash, Cut, and Defog onto your good Pokemon.
True, Gen 4 is where the HMs became a serious problem.
HMs were always a problem in the earlier games.
Yeah, but it's harder here because everything is centered on Mount Coronet.
I'll give the games this, though. When people say, Pokemon games were always easy, I always direct them to Gen 4 because back in the day, they used to throw heavy hitters at you. Cranidos, Roserade, Lucario, and Mismagius are 3 insane boss Pokemon to throw at you.
The fact that Fantina has a Gengar too is crazy.
I mean, let's cut to the chase. If we're talking difficulty, nothing goes crazier than...
Oh God, make it stop.
Literally getting goosebumps hearing this.
If there's any reason to rank these games high at all, it's this right here. Cynthia made these games iconic. If you don't fear her, you're just too young to know what we all went through back in 2006.
Garchomp was an absolute menace.
Gen 4 is a part of Pokemon's golden age. Diamond and Pearl are A tier.
Now hold on a second, Barack. It's true, Gen 4 is in the golden age, but it's not because of Diamond and Pearl. These games are mid.
There's lack of fire types in the game. You only get Ponyta and Chimchar. What an extreme oversight.
You can see the impact it has on Flint. Bro's team has 2 fire types and then randomly a Steelix, Lopunny, and Drifblim.
Still, Diamond and Pearl have to get decent rankings. Great side areas like the Great Marsh and Pokemon contests return. But at the same time, the post-game is weak. This is a clear sign of Game Freak taking 1 step forward and 2 back. Diamond and Pearl have less content than Emerald. Diamond and Pearl introduced the physical special split, which was vital to creating a more robust Pokemon meta, but overall it made some baffling decisions in design. Everything in the game just feels half-baked.
Diamond and Pearl are C tier at best.
You're more generous than me, Joe D tier.
D tier for Diamond and Pearl is crazy.
I do agree there, Barack. The games have a lot of good in them, B tier.
Fine, I'm outvoted here, so B tier it goes, and now we move on to Platinum.
Now, Platinum is how these third versions should be done. It took the problems of Diamond and Pearl and addressed them. more fire types, slightly faster game speed, better post-game, better Pokemon availability, and better story events too.
Emphasis on the story events, the lore behind Giratina is crazy, and the distortion world is peak.
And I love that they changed and improved upon the gym puzzles.
A new Battle Frontier is a welcome addition on top of the additional story with Karen of Team Galactic.
And don't forget my main man, Looker.
Platinum did everything it could to improve the 4th gen. It's the game the Sinnoh region needed all along, A-tier.
Gotta put it in S tier, the game meets all the requirements.
Platinum is great and it improved a lot, but the game is still painfully slow and HMs are still a pain in the ass. A tier at best.
I think Platinum should get S tier. It's a peak 3rd version. And now we're moving on to True Peak Pokemon, Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
HGSS can be summed up with one word: content.
Unlike later remakes, Heart Gold and Soul Silver actually included content from both of the original Gen 2 games, and Crystal as well, giving you a very robust amount of content.
You have access to both Ho-Oh and Lugia and the Suicune side story.
They really went all out with the content on top of old stuff like the bug catching contest. They added in new games as well. The Pokeathlon was the shit.
I was unmatched in the hurdle dash and ring drop games.
Block Smash was my jam.
See me in a game of Circle Push.
Then they dared to do the unthinkable and included the Sinnoh Battle Frontier 2 for no reason at all.
The Kanto region is still pretty bare bones, but at least now you can have gym leader rematches by getting everyone together at the dojo in Saffron City.
Too bad you had to wait until a specific day to get phone numbers, and then wait for another day to actually challenge the gym leader.
The region also still has a problem with the level curve.
Problems aside, HGSS is how you get a remake done. This right here is peak pixel art. It's gorgeous. They even fixed the issue of Johto Pokemon not being available until Kanto with the new Safari Zone too. Game Freak actually learned from their mistake for once.
Heart Gold and Soul Silver are S-tier games. The problems they have are ignorable.
Now we have the 5th gen games, Pokemon Black and White.
Trash games, trash region, literal trash Pokemon.
Oh, here we go with the Gen 1 nostalgia.
It has literally no old Pokemon until the end of the game. Are you kidding me?
That's a good thing, Joe. The Unova games introduced the largest amount of new Pokemon, giving us a completely fresh and unique experience.
Yeah, sure, half the damn Pokemon are ass. The elemental monkeys? Ass. The ice cream Pokemon? Ass. One of the Pokemon is literally just a bigger love disc, and another is Tauros with an afro.
Counterpoint, Hydreigon exists.
It's close to impossible to get Hydreigon in the main game. You can't get Dano or Zweilous until Victory Road, and even then you have to wait until level 64 for it to evolve. The level is so insane that Getsus had to cheat and get one at level 62.
Okay, let's settle down here. Black and White gave us easily the best main story Pokemon games have ever had, with compelling characters like N, and arguably the first 2 rivals that feel like their own characters.
Bianca and Sharon have their own little journeys. Bianca wanting to become more independent and facing off with her father was amazing. And Sharon's desire to learn what it means to be strong is welcome.
Don't forget N, he's your rival and the main antagonist. I love that he battles you using Pokemon that are in the nearby area to test you while hiding his real team.
The story is also unique in that your main goal is not to become champion. The game ends when you defeat N. Becoming champ is something that you do after your main journey.
There's also the gym leaders taking an active part in the events of the story. Pulling up to fight the sages was hype.
On top of that, you got post-game content in the unexplored areas of Unova, including the White Forest and Black City.
Black and White are way too linear. It's a huge step back from the older games in that regard.
You're just hating Joe. Unova is a great region with tons of side content in the routes. Plus, the cities are all uniquely designed. The only Kanto city with half as much lore and identity to it is Lavender Town.
Driftfile City's theme is a permanent banger that by itself counters any argument you have, Joe.
Gotta agree with Donald here.
Joe, it's takes like yours that led to these games being grossly underappreciated. Game Freak took a big step with the 5th gen, and everyone shat on it. And now the 5th gen is widely considered to be the end of the Pokemon Golden Age. Black and White are S-tier games.
You're goddamn right, Barack.
Don't even argue, Joe.
I guess I'm the bad guy here.
Now we're on to the sequels, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2.
Now these are a step up.
Of course you like these games more, Joe. It's back to a generic story, evil team, and main villain. What made Team Plasma unique is completely gone.
Now hold on, I think there's some good in the sequels. It lets you get access to some great Pokemon right out the gate, like Mareep and Riolu.
Early game, Riolu was a welcome surprise, and I think it was great that they expanded the region to include older Mons.
Setting aside whether the story is good or not, it was great of them to finally give us proper direct sequels instead of throwing us a revamped version of Black and White. The region changed in the 2 years. New gyms with Charon, Roxy, and Marlin, and a new Elite Four champion.
Not to mention that Black and White 2 gave us the single coolest battle facility to exist.
What's cooler than a tournament facility? A tournament facility with every gym leader and champion up to that point. Even Red is there.
The remix themes were so sick for that.
Black and White 2 was a great send-off for the 5th gen, and while I think it's inferior to the first games, it's still pretty good. A tier.
B tier, the only thing unique about it was the Pokemon World Tournament. Game Freak took 2 steps back with this one.
They're above average games with your typical story, but with a still well-designed region, and they follow up on the character arcs of N, Bianca, and Charon. Plus, I love Iris's battle theme, A tier.
The better Unova games, A tier.
And now we step out into the world of 3 dimensions. It's Pokemon X and Y.
How is it that the 2 games that needed it most didn't get a 3rd version?
X and Y brought some new, fresh ideas into the mix that I think went unappreciated back in the day. Mega Evolution might have been a bit of a problem balance-wise, but it was a fresh new idea that gave us some of the best designs in the series.
Making a useless Pokemon like Mawile a heavy hitter was a welcome change.
That was also thanks to the addition of the Fairy type, which was vital to nerfing Dragon types, which went unchallenged for multiple generations. The Kalos region also had an insane regional dex featuring over 400 Pokemon.
I should hope so. They only added 72 new ones.
It's too bad this was the beginning of the Pokemon games abandoning any amount of depth put into the regions. Cities and towns have minimal lore, and there's hardly any side content.
Not to mention that the game is piss easy because of the EXP. All your rivals are trash, and the gym leaders only use 2 to 3 Pokemon for the entire game. How far we've fallen from the days where Pokemon hit you in the face with a goddamn Rose Raid in the 2nd gym.
Team Flare is also an excessively mid-team. Their fit is awful, and Lysandra is just Cyrus 2.0.
I blame the move to 3D for everything wrong with Pokemon today, and it started here with X and Y. The post-game is trash, and the main story isn't much better, F tier.
Okay, let's not get crazy here. X and Y have redeeming factors. It's at least B tier.
B tier is crazy. These are without a doubt 2 of the worst games in the series.
I don't know about that one, Donald. Barry had a point that X and Y have some saving graces. I, for one, don't think the EXP all is that big a deal. Just turn it off or switch your Pokemon out when they start getting too strong.
X and Y are a pair of the better 3D titles, and they're definitely better than F.
I think they're pretty mid, so how about we put them in C tier?
It's the first game in the series to give us fully customizable clothing for our trainer. And while it may be lacking side areas, the Kalos region is still beautifully designed. In my opinion, it's the best looking 3D region to date. The art design is outstanding.
The downfall of Pokemon may have began with X and Y, but this isn't the worst of it. Next up, we've got Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
Holy f***, I hate these games so much.
They're fairly decent remakes, George.
Fairly decent remakes? Have you lost your damn mind, Donald? These remakes are a massive backstep for the Pokemon franchise and perfectly encapsulate the laziness the games face today.
Okay, let's hear you elaborate on that, George.
Instead of making the remakes more like Emerald, they sat here and made them straight copies of Ruby and Sapphire with only a few slight differences. No Battle Frontier, no revamped gym leader teams or rematches, no Rayquaza side plot.
No, Battle Frontier is a wide miss. They really thought people wanted the Battle Maison from X and Y instead.
The fact that Masuda sat here and said they didn't put the Battle Frontier in because they thought not enough people would appreciate the challenge or the feature perfectly demonstrates how out of touch he is with his own game's community, and it pisses me off to no end.
For what it's worth, the Delta episode in the post-game does bring Rayquaza into the picture.
The Delta episode is ass. Zinnia is boring too.
Okay, but her battle theme is a straight banger.
Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are straight trash for daring to destroy the legacy of the Hoenn games.
I mean, it is still the Hoenn region with all the great things it had before. Plus, it added Mega Evolution into the mix for all 3 of the starters. Plus, it added cool features like the Dex Nav.
You've grown soft, Donald. If the Johto remakes had been this half-assed, you would be torching them with me?
That's because Johto is a shit region with a ton of problems. Hoenn is actually good, even if the remakes drop the ball.
I do see what George is getting at, but Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are the best games of the 6th generation. I'd put them in B tier.
Same, Hoenn is just such an enjoyable region.
Disgusting. You guys approving of these remakes when they should have been so much more makes me sick to my stomach.
I know you didn't win the popular vote back in the day, George, but sometimes democracy is important.
Motherfucker, you didn't win the popular vote twice in a row?
Okay, steady you two. We don't need any infighting. Next up is the 7th generation, Pokemon Sun and Moon.
I'd like to say I played this game, but I'm still trying to get through the 7-hour-long introduction.
In theory, the Alola region has a lot going for it. It's too bad that it's so heavily reliant on being tied to Kanto instead of having its own identity.
And why are so many of the Pokemon so damn slow?
I liked Sun and Moon. They had a great plot and good characters.
Good characters, my ass. How has to be about the least serious rival in the series.
Hey, don't diss my boy Guzma. His battle theme goes crazy. Gladion is also the best rival we've had in a while, too.
How do you guys feel about Z moves?
They are funny to look at, I'll give them that much.
Mega evolutions all the way Z moves are just really powerful standard attacks.
I will give Sun and Moon one thing, though. The player actually becoming the champion and needing to defend their title was a good touch to the post-game. It's how the game should have been doing it this whole time.
Surely Sun and Moon also deserves points for actually trying to mix the formula up a little. I wouldn't say I like the island trials more than gyms or anything, but at least they tried something here.
Not to mention that these are the first games to change up how HMs work. In fact, they're totally obsolete thanks to the new Ride Pokemon, a feature we'll see remain and be iterated on in the following generations.
Sun and Moon still show us how far the games are falling with the lack of side areas to explore. The towns have no lore, and the routes are getting more linear.
That's true, but I think Sun and Moon stepped up from X and Y, so why don't we put it in B tier? It had a more engaging story and some fresh ideas on changing the formula.
Bad, uninspiring region, bad Pokemon designs, terrible and long-winded plot, D tier.
I know you didn't just call my boy Rowlet bad. A-tier games.
I'd give Sun and Moon a good C tier. Perfectly acceptable, but mid-games.
Let's put Sun and Moon in C tier and move on to Ultra Sun and Moon.
These games might cut down on the hand-holding, but a polished turd is still a turd.
I have a strong dislike for these games. Just when Game Freak seemed to finally be abandoning the stupid-ass third version thing, they brought it back, but twofold. Now you get 2 remakes of the game a year later.
Even if you liked Ultra Sun and Moon, it became clear to everyone here that the enhanced third versions of Pokemon games have completely overstayed their welcome. There was zero reason why Vanilla Sun and Moon couldn't have just gotten DLC instead.
Overall, Ultra Sun and Moon are the same game with some slight differences in story and the addition of Rainbow Rocket, which was an admittedly entertaining way to introduce old foes like Giovanni.
The businessman in me respects the low-effort remake to make a quick buck, but the gamer in me wants to vomit at the existence of these games.
Bit of an odd case here. Technically, Ultra Sun and Moon are the better games in basically every way. More content, better pacing, and you could argue the story changes are better. But I disagree with the existence of these games.
Just put them in C tier with Sun and Moon. They're about damn near the same game anyway.
Okay, and now we are finally moving on to the Switch games, starting with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee.
Peak!
Trash!
So fucking peak.
The worst games to ever exist.
The best games, period.
Absolute ass.
Clear's your favorite.
Trash!
Peak!
Trash!
Peak!
Trash!
Peak!
Seems we have a bit of a disagreement here.
Will the two of you shut the fuck up?
Not only did they choose to remake Pokemon Yellow, they fucking added Pokemon Go mechanics to the game. They replaced Gary, who is actually a good rival with that fucking dweeb Trace. To make matters worse, you can only access the Kanto Pokemon in that weird little nut Pokemon.
It's called Melton, and you're just an old boomer who can't appreciate new stuff, Donald.
You literally railed against Gen 5 Joe.
I'm talking about the Go mechanics. They were a welcome change to the gameplay. Instead of just mashing the fucking A button for 12 hours, you actually get to catch the Pokemon.
I'm surprised you can even flip the Joy-Con without breaking your fragile old man wrist.
Shut up. The removal of random encounters was also goated. Now Pokemon roam around in sight, which is the way we always imagined.
Let's be honest, Joe. The Let's Go games were just them dipping their toes into the Switch hardware. The games faithfully recreate Kanto, but they don't do much else. The games are more of a sideways movement from Pokemon Yellow, setting aside the graphical improvements.
Kanto is still as boring as it was back in the day. Master Trainers make for a piss-poor post-game, too. D tier.
Straight into F tier?
I don't even know why I'm wasting my time.
The Let's Go games were a fun little test, but they aren't worth much more than one playthrough, and even that's stretching it a bit. F tier. Now we're finally on to Generation 8 with Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Let's address the elephant in the room here. Dexit.
Yeah, it blows. There's certain Pokemon that are just plain unobtainable in Sword and Shield, and this practice continues into the following Switch titles.
If we open this can of worms, the discussion will never end. Everyone bitched about this back in 2019, so we'll just focus on the games.
Not as if that does Sword and Shield any favors. The games are ass.
There's no doubt now side areas are completely gone. There's barely any side activity at all. You go to a city, fight the gym, do main story content, and leave.
Literally, one of the cities is a straight line.
It sucks because many of the cities and locations look pretty and well designed, but there ain't shit to do in any of them.
Their characters and plot suck too. The bad guy's motivation is preventing an energy crisis that isn't going to be a problem for like 1,000 years.
How can Pokemon have an energy crisis when electric, fire, flying, and water Pokemon can all generate the necessary forces to run society?
I will give them a few points for Hop. Many people write him off as How 2.0, but Hop actually does have a bit of a character arc after he loses to Bede, becoming a more serious battler.
Too bad that's all you really get, though. Leon is basic. Bede is annoying and incompetent. And the only reason people like Marine is because she's a cute goth girl.
Well, we got our wish with Game Freak finally making DLC instead of a third version.
The Sword and Shield DLC is actually pretty decent content.
Yeah, except it proves that they can add the absent Pokemon into the games and are just choosing not to.
And what about this generation's new gimmick, Dynamax Pokemon?
It's just Mega Evolution and Z moves conjoined, another generation, another gimmick.
Sword and Shield does make the wild area and location for us to encounter Pokemon roaming in the overworld. But it's like an ocean that's 1,000 miles wide and 2 inches deep.
A failed attempt to emulate Breath of the Wild.
I legitimately cannot think of anything special about Sword and Shield F tier.
Gotta agree, Sword and Shield were not a great first step for the first main console Pokemon games.
The only thing, and I mean the only thing I can give these games is that they made getting into competitive Pokemon a good deal less tedious thanks to the Nature Mints, bottle caps, and ability capsules.
Games are still pretty ass, though. F tier.
Agreed. Moving on, we have the remakes of the 4th gen games Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
More like Brilliant Doo-Doo and Shining Poop. They once again decided to remake the inferior versions of the 4th gen games. No platinum elements at all. They didn't even include the Battle Frontier, grossly cutting down the post-game content.
I'm personally not a fan of the art design either. It looks like they were going for the same feel as the Link's Awakening remake, but it just isn't fitting here.
I think it looks decent. Hell of a lot better than that slop from Sword and Shield.
I don't want to waste much time on these remakes. I'm pretty sure the general consensus is that they're awful. But I will give it points for some of the post-game rematches against the gym leaders and Elite Four. They legitimately have competitive teams with good items, move sets, and abilities.
The final Cynthia rematch is crazy. Her team gets up into the 80s with Garchomp matching Red's Pikachu at level 88. She has perfect IVs too.
And I suppose it's fair to mention BDSP addresses the Pokemon availability issue with the new Underground.
That's all the game's got though, D tier. Now we're on to something a bit more unique, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Another return to the Sinnoh region, but in the distant past.
Another failed Breath of the Wild clone.
Well, hold on now, George. Legends Arceus isn't too bad.
What's come over you, Donald?
I'm surprised he isn't parroting that PlayStation 2 graphics meme everyone was throwing out a year ago.
Relax, let's hear Donald out.
Don't get me wrong, Legends Arceus looks like shit and has an awfully bland and uninspiring open world with one major settlement in it, and it has a mere fraction of the total amount of Pokemon. But this is the first main series Pokemon game to truly do something different. Instead of gym badges, we get the noble Pokemon, which made for fun, unique boss encounters. Legends Arceus is also actually decently challenging, which is a step up from the recent Pokemon titles.
You're spitting, Donald. Legends Arceus actually gives us a unique viewpoint of the Pokemon world. Now we're finally getting to see them as the dangerous animals they are instead of our cute little pocket pets.
And we get one of the craziest battles against my dude Volo of the Ginkgo Guild.
And despite there being only one location in the game, Jubilee Village is an ever-evolving place, thanks to a lot of the side missions where you bring a new Pokemon to help development of the place.
Legends Arceus had a lot of potential to be the most revolutionary Pokemon game we've ever seen. Unfortunately, it was developed in tandem with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which means it didn't get proper attention.
And speaking of those ass games...
Let's rank Arceus first. I'd give it a B tier.
I agree, Brock. Legends Arceus is the best Switch Pokemon game.
Now we can wrap this up with Scarlet and Violet.
A pair of absolute fucking disasters of a Pokemon game. How in the fuck do these games look worse than Legends Arceus? What excuse is there for the insane frame rate drops when, let's go, Pikachu and Eevee could manage a stable 30 FPS? Why did the difficulty go all the way back down to 0? Geeta got to be the worst champion to date. Yes, even worse than Diantha.
How long have you been holding that in, Donald?
The entire video. I'm done talking about Scarlet and Violet. They're F-tier games. I'm done talking about Pokemon for today too. The franchise might be more successful than ever before, but it's dead where it matters most, in my heart.
Well, alrighty then.
Donald already said everything bad about the game, so why don't we talk about the good?
And another thing, Game Freak is literally 0 for 3 with open world Pokemon games. Knock it the fuck off already. They can't do it. Go back to Let's Go style games with decent stories, good challenges, and sizable post games. Not every game needs to be open world.
Okay, the good. Scarlet and Violet do admittedly give us more to do than just gyms, Evil Team, Elite Four, and a battle tower. You've got 3 sets of main stories to follow between the gyms, the Titan Pokemon, and Team Star.
Team Star was kind of mid, if I'm being honest. They're just gyms by a different name. And the only difference is it's about a bunch of kids who got bullied at the school.
Speaking of which, the school part of these games is underutilized.
I do think the Titan Pokemon story makes for a decent challenge and has a more sympathetic storyline. Arvin trying to cure his old Maba stiff is a touching tale, just a boy and his dog.
The gyms are just standard stuff. Nimona is a decent rival, especially since she's apparently already a champion. But as usual, because these games are so piss easy, it's not like she ever feels like a champion.
I'm normally more understanding of these types of things, and I know Scarlet and Violet sold insanely well like all Pokemon games do. But I can't pretend like these games aren't a massive problem.
Even though Scarlet and Violet are better than Sword and Shield, it would be irresponsible to ignore all the technical issues. The shutdowns, lag, bugs, the terrible art design on top of the graphics. It's all just unforgivable. The best I can give these games is a C tier. It's the first true open world game and has good characters, but it's just so incomplete.
You're a nicer man than me, Barack. The fact that some people blame the Switch for Scarlet and Violet when it runs Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom far better makes me hate the games even more. Sure, the Switch isn't exactly the best console on the market, but you could put these games on a PS5 and they would probably still look and run like pure cheeks. Scarlet and Violet belong with their predecessor in F tier.
I'll give it a D tier for trying to do something different and actually having a real open world. It's just too bad the entire game lacks focus and looks like it's being held together with duct tape and glue.
Well, George, it was good talking to you. I was planning on ranking starters later if you're down for that.
Oh, hell yeah, Barack, get me in on that.
Should I call Donald back?
He's gonna whine if you don't, so go ahead. All right, y'all stay safe out there, drink plenty of water, get some sleep, and we'll see you on the next one.